Hello everybody, my name's Donald McGurk. I'm the Secretary of the Benson Nature Group and I'm talking to you today about making observations and recording those observations. So why are we talking about observations and recordings? Well, the main reason is that every year at our sort of annual Christmas do, our chair, Tom Stevenson, gives a little talk about what the group has recorded over the year. And it's always vaguely depressing that 95%, I would say, of the observations made by the group are made by Tom. I've always wanted us to all contribute more to that, or have the opportunity to contribute more than that. So I've been badgering the planning group who put together these talks to get someone to stand up and talk about making observations and recordings and to teach people like me how to do it. And the way that turned out was I was then volunteered to give that talk from an amateur's perspective. So that's why I'm here talking to you. So I guess I should tell you a little bit about me and my qualifications giving this talk. Well, the first ones are that I'm not an expert. We have a lot of experts who come and talk to us. We have a lot of experts in the group, people who are professional ecologists and naturalists. We have an awful lot of professionals who come and talk to us as well. We also have some really good amateurs, and the kind of person I mean by that is people who've been bird watchers or whatever for their whole life, and so have a huge amount of experience, knowledge and credibility as a bird watcher. I'm none of these things. I'm a true amateur. So why am I talking to you? Well, I was drawn into the world of ecology and nature because I'm married to a professional ecologist. Here she is in action. I also am a professional aviator myself. And why is that relevant? Well, it's because we're taught some really useful skills for flying that also apply across to the world of observing and recording. In particular, we're taught right from the beginning of our training about identifying aircraft. This is to help you identify enemy aircraft, really. But a lot of the skills you get from that, from picking out those key features, really help you with observing nature. We're also taught to constantly scan the sky, looking for things and to pick things out, because that's how you spot other aircraft and avoid flying into them and crashing. So these two skills will be able to identify things, but also to just pick things out, are stuff that we use to live and work all day in the world of aviation. So these things together mean, although I don't really have many of the kind of advanced skills, I have a lot of the raw stuff you need to be a reasonable observer and recorder. The other thing I wanted to mention was our group. So we, in our group, we know a lot, but we don't know necessarily a huge amount about what's around us. Benson Nature Group grew out of the Benson, let me get this right, Ecological study team, who spent a lot of time studying and recording what was around Benson. But these days, as I've mentioned already, it's mostly Tom who does this recording. And personally, I think it'd be really useful if we could all see more about what was around us and help each other to learn more of what's around us. The reason I found that I haven't really stepped into the world of recording and observing before now is that I lack the confidence, because it seems that you have to be relatively expert to be able to make observations and to know also how to get into the systems for making recordings. And I lack the confidence of both these things. Fortunately, through this little talk, I've been given the opportunity to go out and find out a lot more about both of these things. And the final thing really I wanted to talk about in my intro is the future. So I foresee a future where Benson Nature Group, a bit like some of the other groups in the local area, make a much bigger contribution to recording what's around us, and also that growing our skills and also be able to see what each other have seen and know what's around us. So not just record, but also be able to look at what's around us and understand it better. So, why observe and record? So before the COVID-19 closed down, we were hoping to get someone to come in from CEH or somewhere to give us a little talk about why we observe and record, but that's not been possible. So it's down to me, again, the amateur, to present this bit. So the first bit is, it's to allow us to know what is around us. Now that may seem pretty obvious, But we don't really have a good idea of what's around us. We have an intuitive feel for what's out there, but we don't really have access to records as a group about what we've seen. And it would be really useful if we did know what was around us. The next point is, and this is something I've really found, is an opportunity to improve your own personal knowledge by going out and looking at stuff that makes you want to then understand what it is you've seen and investigate, and also get support from other people to identify what you've seen. It kind of builds your own interest and knowledge, and therefore helps you increase your knowledge. The added bit is that it gives us a chance to start inspiring and bringing on the next generation of scientists and naturalists. So the young people around us can see us being enthused and interested in this, get involved in what we see, and get involved in us recording it. So it also adds to the national and indeed international kind of database of information that's out there about nature. And I don't think it's ever been more important to be adding to that kind of that large set of that giant spreadsheet of information about what's around us. And finally, some of that information in that database is used to influence a whole number of areas, including, I've touched here on planning, and by that I mean kind of developers and the like in housing, which has been really kind of important around Benson where we live. But generally, it just influences lots of decisions by people like local councils about what to do with the place where we live. So it's really important that the data that we gather is also accessible to people making these decisions. So what types of recording are there? I'm going to just go through the ones I've come across. I'm sure there are lots of other types as well. So the first one is the kind of one-off or annual tie-ins. These are usually kind of over a specific period, often a weekend or a week long in the summer. They're usually group specific, so they're looking at birds or butterflies or some such thing. They're usually run by one of these conservation organisations, often for them to build kind of interest, to have a little blitz and get children and adults interested in their area and to add to their data, their database of information. And also, these tend to be used by a mix. Some are aimed at specialists and experts, but quite often they're aimed at amateurs and children, more in the interest of getting them involved and excited rather than in the realm of building up a great wealth of high quality research data. The next group is kind of related to that, and these are the ongoing but kind of group specific research. So again, organisations like Butterfly Conservation, they run ongoing surveys to build up some really kind of long-term data about what's out there. So again, these are usually specialist groups who are running these. They have their own database, and it builds up some really good long-term data. And the final group that's out there is your kind of ongoing but more general naturalist and ecological studies. Often these are either aimed at specialists, but there's also some out there aimed more at the generalists, accepting kind of a lower quality of data to build up databases. And it's this group that I'm going to primarily look at in the rest of my talk. But one of the most important things of all of these is quite a lot of these different surveys at some point share the data they've gathered. So whatever you do, please don't forget, you mustn't double record anything that you see out there. So if you're doing the garden butterfly survey or whatever, make sure you're also not dropping that data you see into one of the other more general databases, because at some point they'll almost certainly get transferred across. So recording itself, there are lots of gateways into recording, lots of ways you can do it. There's the traditional kind of pen and paper, make your recordings, write down what you've seen, draw sketches, whatever it is that goes on. Often these days though, that data is then, rather than being stuck in the post and collated in some dusty file, these are nearly always added into some kind of online database, whether that's that you've emailed it in and it's added to someone's database, or you're able to actually access the database and drop the data in. And the final version, which is kind of really prevalent and probably the most common and easiest access into these things these days, is using your phone. So getting some kind of app onto your phone, some application that allows you, when you're out and about, to see things and drop data straight into your phone that again gets sent off to wherever and added to their database. So now we're getting into the kind of the core, my guide. So I'll give you the ground rules I gave myself when looking at this. The first one is I'm going to look at the ongoing general recording type of observing and recording. The reason is I want to be able to go out and see, because I'm interested in everything that's out there. I just want to be able to record what I see. So what I make observations about are just the things that are out there. I don't have any niche area that I'm interested in, so I just want to record what I see. The second bit I want to say is these are just my pros and cons. I'm hoping by the end I can convince you that there's a good way forward for Benson Nature Group that we can all kind of record. But this is just my view. These are just my pros and cons and my perspectives. So there are three systems that I looked at really. The first one was the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre. And the main reason I went to look at these first is because I know that Tom Stevenson, our chair, provides data pretty regularly to the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre, or TVERC. So I wanted to look at that. The second one I wanted to look at is iRecord. That's generated by the Biological Records Centre and championed out of the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, so very local. So a lot of people in our area know quite a lot about that and use it. And finally, I looked at iNaturalist, which is the kind of it's kind of a bigger, more long-standing and established and international database and method of recording. So I looked at all three of these. I had a go at all of them. I made recordings on all of them. I didn't double record, but I have tried out all of them, and I've seen what I think are most of the pros and cons. Again, caveated, this is an amateur looking at them and looking at them from the perspective of someone who doesn't always know what it is they've seen and wants something easy, or wants a system that's easy to be able to record, but also that's going to help me to identify what I've seen. So I'll talk about TVERC first, Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre. It's very local, it's Thames Valley, it's Oxfordshire, and I'm going to say Buckinghamshire. No, Berkshire. That was Edel just giving me a nod there. So it's very local, so it's useful for us. It's good to have a source of local data. But it's only an online database, and by that I mean there's no app, so there's no method of walking around with your phone and just snapping what you see. You have to come back, make a record of what you've seen, and then come back and put it onto the database. So personally, I find that pretty painful. I much prefer to be able to just see stuff, take a snap if I can, or make a recording and do my recording while I'm out and about. Particularly because I do a lot of my recording while I'm either out running or out cycling or out dog walking. I'm not necessarily actually out on a kind of an ecological mission. I'm out doing something else, and so I see something interesting and I want to capture it there and then. One of the great pros though of the TVERC system is that Tom has already made thousands and thousands of records onto TVERC. So on their database, there's a really good record of what's around Benson and Ulm over quite a long period that Tom's made. So it's got a really good supply of historical data. The other pro about recording stuff with TVERC is that, like a lot of all the environmental record centres, they're a known quantity that people like planners and developers go to in terms of getting their data to help them make decisions about roads, housing estates, etc. So they're a really good source for ensuring that the data you've recorded is getting to those planners and developers. Moving on to the disadvantages I found of TVERC. Well, the first one is there's no phone app, so it's just a bit of a slightly painful method. You have to make your recording on pen and paper or whatever, come back and go and upload it onto your computer. Second, and possibly even more irritating, is there's no easy access to that data once it's gone in. You put your data in, it goes into TVERC's database, and although as a group that data is free to us to get back again, you can't access it directly through their website. You can ask them for stuff and they'll send you information back, or certainly that's how I found it. So although the information is good, it's almost like you've lost control of some of your own data once it's gone out of your own hands. The final bit that I found with TVERC that was a little bit painful was that there's no support for amateurs like me. So you really have to be confident about what you've seen before you upload it. because there's no system for helping you work out what it is you've seen. So that's TVERK from me. I didn't really enjoy using the TVERK website, I have to say, but the important bit is it has got a lot of data about Benson on there, and it is used by developers. So the second system I looked at was using iRecord. So this is different to TVERK in that they have a phone app and a pretty user-friendly online method of getting data on as well. So a great advantage for me, online and a smartphone app to use. Second great thing is it has a lovely, because it's on an app, it has a lovely auto GPS facility. So while you're out and about and you see something, it gets your location as you make the record. So you take your photo, you go straight to the app, and it gets your location there and then. So you're not going to make a mistake with recording where you've seen something. I found the app really easy to use. Just very simple. One of the advantages I found of the iRecord, this took a bit more research really, is that the TVERK database does draw reasonably frequently, not every day, but reasonably frequently data from the iRecord database. So you make a record on your phone, it goes to iRecord's database, and then that data itself gets kind of waterfallen down into the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre. So in terms of your worries about being used by developers, it's not used directly from iRecord by developers, but the TVERK data is fed or gets fed by iRecord, so you don't lose it. And the last bit is, and I guess this applies to TVERK as well, although I didn't mention it, it's British, which means that an awful lot of the naming conventions and just the way it runs is very intuitive to us, and so the system works very nicely. It's set up for a British audience to use, and I'll touch a bit more about that later on. So the disadvantages though, a bit like TVERK, it didn't really provide any support to the amateur. You've really got to know what it is that you're making a record of, or you risk feeling like I would feel some smart aleck pointing out that what you've got is completely wrong, your record being deleted. It certainly has the feel of it's set up, designed for people who are relatively expert, and when you put something in, you know what you've seen. So that's iRecord. I actually really liked using the iRecord app, but again, I was very careful how I used it because I only used it for things where I was 100% confident in what I'd seen. And so that brings me on to the last of the three things I looked at, which is using iNaturalist. So iNaturalist was probably my favourite of the three. Well, it was my favourite of the three systems I looked at, and that's because from my perspective, it fixed all of the kind of problems and challenges that the other two systems presented me with. And most importantly, it's really beginner friendly. And that's because there's a system in it where if you take a photograph of something, an insect or whatever, you can click on its Help Me Identify This button, and it runs a really clever algorithm fed by lots of data that puts up a list of what it thinks it is most likely to be. And it does that in a kind of in a waterfall system, so it works down from the genus through to the group and then down to species. So it really helps you to identify what you've seen. And if you lack the confidence, even when you're into, it's got a relatively high probability of it being something, and you go through its guide about what to look for, even if you lack that, you can still make a record kind of at a higher level up, so at group or subspecies level, such that other people then come in later on and help you to refine exactly what it was. So I found it from an amateur's perspective really helpful. It also does feed the iRecord database. So a bit like how the iRecord database gets pulled into TVERK, iRecord pulls data from iNaturist as well. So it means that their database gets bigger and bigger and uses more and more of this information. So again, although not directly used by developers, it does fall down eventually into that big pot of information that people like TVERK are using and that developers then get access to. Another advantage from our perspective is that it's used by our neighbour group, Wallingford Wildlife. And in fact, one of the organisers of Wallingford Wildlife is one of the designers of the iRecord app. but Wallingford Wildlife have recognised that getting beginners and amateurs involved is really important, and therefore they recommend to their group to use iNaturalist for exactly the reasons I've just kind of explained, that it gives you that chance to identify stuff that you just wouldn't have the confidence to identify, or at least to post and allow other people to help you identify that you just wouldn't have the confidence to otherwise. And I see a real advantage to our neighbours in Wallingford if they're building up a big source of information on iNaturalist, that it'd be useful for us to parallel that. So there are some disadvantages. I've already touched on a bit about developers. It's not used directly by developers, but it does trickle down eventually to that database that developers and planners get into. And finally, it does have some Americanisms, and this can be vaguely irritating. The Americanisms, the main way they're annoying is that it uses some American names for animals and plants that maybe aren't the ones that we would commonly use. But that naming convention isn't what's at the heart of the system, so it doesn't affect your identification. It uses, it seems, the Latin names really, which are the same, obviously, for identification. But you might see that colloquially it's using labels for creatures that maybe aren't the ones we use most commonly. So that's a bit annoying. The other thing that's a bit annoying is because that kind of peer-reviewed identification system that's in it is viewed by people from across the world, because it's an international app based in America. It does mean that there is a slim chance that you'll get people whose bias is more towards species they see in the US rather than thinking about what is most likely to be seen in the UK. But the guides that are built into the app help you to refine that. But there is a chance that you might get some off-the-wall identifications. So that's really my pros and cons of the systems, of the three systems I looked at. For me, iRecord and iNaturalist stood out as being better than the TVerk system for recording, primarily because they have an app you can use. And I like them both, they are both good. But this talk really is aimed at trying to get more amateurs involved in recording, because I think it's breaking down those barriers of confidence about what you've seen and also ease of use of the system that are the things that are going to help us get people involved. So from my perspective, as an amateur and as part of a club that's trying to get people involved, I think iNaturalist is the method that we should be using for recording. So this is my little summary of iNaturalist. It's got, in fact, I've set up on it a Benson Nature Group project. That's effectively a little Benson Nature Group club. If you imagine iNaturalist a bit like Strava, where you go off and run and you record your runs or your cycles or whatever, using one of these apps is just like that. You go out and you see stuff and you record what you've seen. And what I've done by setting up the Benson Nature Group project is anyone who is a member of Benson Nature Group, when you log in, the observations you'll see will be the ones that we have made. And eventually I'm planning to bound that geographically around sort of Benson and ULM and RAF Benson, so that we can focus in on our observations of what's around us primarily. But you still have access to all the wider data as well. The best thing to do is to go onto inaturalist.org, look at their website, have a look around, and get yourself a login. You need a login to access the information and to make a record. And then you can find me, that's my login, Donald McGurk, and let me know and I'll add you to the Benson Nature Group project. The website itself has a lot more functionality than the app, but it's the ease of use of the app that I found that really made iNaturalist the way to go forward. And I'll pause there and have a slurp of my tea. So, that was a lovely cup of tea. On with the talk. What I'm showing you here is, this is the home screen from the website for iNaturalist. What you're actually looking at is my content page of the home screen. So what it's showing here is some comments that some people have made about some observations that I've put on here as records. And what they're trying to do is they're either refining my identification or they're confirming what I saw. So the next thing I wanted to talk through was really making an observation, and what I'm going to use here is an example of me making a record using the app on my phone. So I saw this in the garden, buzzing around the green alkanet that's kind of running rampant around by our pond. As you can see, what we've got here and here, I managed to get reasonably good photographs of something that was kind of hovering and interested in the flowers, but I really wasn't 100% certain what it was. But I managed to get a couple of snaps, and so I opened up the app, as you can see here on your left, and decided to make an observation. So the first thing I did was I added the photograph top left. You can put in more than one photograph. I think I only put one in on this occasion. I might have used both, I can't quite remember. So I didn't really know what I was looking at, as I say. So this is where the magic for amateurs really comes into play, because I tapped on, what did you see, view suggestions, this bar here, and then it goes into its database and uses its algorithms to try and make some suggestions for you. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see its suggestions. So the database was pretty sure it was a Bombilius genus, and then it gave its top 10 list of what it could possibly be within that. You can see it uses kind of American names, or you might not be able to know this, but what it calls here the greater bee fly. I think that's the dark-edged bee fly in this country, but it's still the same Latin name. You get a bit more information if you want to by pressing one of these kind of blue eyes in a circle. They take you to a little bit of information with some more detailed photos to help you refine your identification yourself. I wasn't confident enough in what it was beyond just being Bombilius, so I just selected that. It then gave me the opportunity to locate where it was. You get to that by pressing on the tab that shows no location. If you press on that, it then gives you some options to input location. And this is where you get your first, or your next view of it being an international app, in that it shows a map of the world. And initially, the few times I used this, I would then, you can see the blue blob where we are, I would then zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and scroll it around, move it around until I found exactly where I was, and then would use that location. It was only subsequently I then found if you press this little green arrow down on the bottom left, it uses your location for the location. So all you have to do is take your snap, get your first stab at identification, a sort of a top level identification, press that and you get my location, and you've got nearly all of the data that you need to make an observation. So over on the right hand screen here, you can see now it's added in my Latin long, and all you have to do after that is press share, and you've made your record. Not very complicated. In this case, I was pretty confident that the identification I'd made was good enough. And that's how it then appears in your on your app. So you can see here on the left-hand side a number of the observations I've made, and at the top was the most recent one at the time, which was my buzzy thing, which was a member of the genus Greater Bee Fly, Bombilius, but no more information than that. And you can see where it was, in big handfuls where it was seen, which was near to Wallingford. And then over on the right-hand side there, you can see when you tap on it, what it then brings up. So it shows the location where it was seen here by that little red marker, and you can see at the bottom there that it still needs further identification. So what it's saying there is, yes, I've put something on, but really to be of greater value, then some other people need to come and have a look and help me identify it further. And so I went off and had a cup of tea or whatever. And when I came back half an hour or so later, you can see that the status had changed on my homepage, because this little speech bubble here with a number in it has turned red, and it's got the number 2 in it. And what that means is that there are now a couple of people have commented on it on my observation. And then if you look over on the right-hand side, when I tapped on it, you can see that 2 different people have refined my identification from just a member of the greater bee flies to being Bombilius major, the American name greater bee fly, or as we would say, dark-edged bee fly. So you can see now the information's been, the identification, has been refined and improved. You can then go in if you want to have a look at use that eye information, that eye in the circle, to go and look at the further details on those, and just make sure you're happy before you can then click agree and accept that those people have then refined your identification. And that's an observation made, and there's been a handrail all the way through it for beginners and amateurs like me. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about a bit more is the Benson Nature Group project. And this is really just the club side of using iNaturalist. So I set this up, and the way I set it up was just by using the members of the group. So what it does now is it's got its own little banner. It's if you go to projects and go to Benson Nature Group, you can have a look and see all the observations that any members of the group, Benson Nature Group, have made. You can see where they're located. You can see what's most commonly seen by us. You can see, broadly speaking, there's lots and lots of information you can mine into about Benson Nature Group. In future, what we might be able to do, I touched on this earlier, is we might be able to, or we can, geographically bound that if we want to limit the information we've got. So we can really focus in on what's in Benson. But as it's set up at the moment, if you're a member of Benson Nature Group, I can add you to this little pool of information, and you'll be able to access and see all the stuff that everyone in Benson Nature Group has seen and recorded over this year. It has the huge advantage that we can also then see which ones need further refining or further identifying or agreeing, and we can all go in and help each other and see where we've seen stuff that needs more work, and also to see what's common around Benson. And this little map here just shows all the observations that have been made by members of Benson Nature Group, which so far is only 2 members, so that's Edel and I, because you need to log on to the app and set up a little account to be able to be added to this. So finally, here's my amateur's guide to recording and observing. Let's all use iNaturalist because it's really supportive for amateurs, and it's easy to access the information and even to get some simple analysis about observations made by Benson Nature Group. So go to iNaturalist.org, have a look around, have a look at Benson Nature Group, create yourself a little account. It takes 30 seconds, it's not a problem at all. Then if you're happy to, drop me an email, the Benson Nature Group sec, you'll all have my email address. So drop me an email with your username on it. Obviously you don't need to tell me your password or anything daft like that, but if you give me your username, I can then add you to the Benson Nature Group project, so the Benson Nature Group club, and then your data will all start appearing on that database, or sort of that sub-database. And then get out there and start recording. It's really easy, as I say. I was able to do it. It's easier than any other way I found. So get out there, start seeing stuff, start recording it, and also start helping to ID stuff that people like me who aren't as confident about what we've seen, start IDing what we've seen to help improve the quality of the data we've got. Remember, do not double record. If you start putting stuff on iNaturalist, don't put it somewhere else, or if you're doing one of these temporary little studies, just use that for a weekend, but don't put it on iNaturalist, or we'll end up double recording what we've seen. But do use iNaturalist for all your general observations you see out there. And then on a monthly basis, once we've got this up and running and people are recording, we'll be able to share with the group, we'll be able to do little screenshots from iNaturalist and send you out summaries of what people are seeing out and about around Benson. So that brings me to the end of my little talk about recording and observing from an amateur's perspective. But I thought I ought to finish with one little photo. You got a snippet of it earlier. So in reality, I should have been doing this for years. This is a photo of me sat down in the Falkland Islands, looking out to sea across a beach full of elephant seals. So I've been out observing and seeing nature for a long time and never really done anything with it. But now is all of our chance to get on and make that into useful data. Right, thank you Benson Nature Group. Looking forward to seeing you all once COVID-19 is all over and we can get back to face-to-face talks and walks and visits. Thank you, cheerio.